Welcome, everybody. At this time, I would like to introduce Seth.
Hey, thanks Thor, and thanks everybody for coming. You know, this is a real honor to be here in Portland because this is where it all started for me. And, you know, now I find myself thinking a lot about the future. You know, I'm 67 years old, which you never really think you're going to hit, but voila. And so, you know, I'm thinking about the future, and that's a fool's errand, really, you know, because like, how you think about the future. But as Winston Churchill said, the farther back you go, the further forward you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run really quickly through the history of vegetarianism in the U.S. in the last 200 years, and it's going to allow us to kind of extrapolate a little bit, like if there's been this much progress in the last 200 years and what's happening right now, which is incredible, by the way, from a commercial standpoint. I'm going to cover that. And then I'm going to finish up with my own predictions of what this means and what are some of the headlines that I think we're going to see in our vegan future. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to the first non-flesh eaters in the United States. And this was a small sect right outside of Liverpool, England. You know, before they gave us the Beatles, they gave us vegetarianism. And there was this Reverend Cowherd. How's that for an ironic name for vegetarian? And he sat up there on January 29th, 1809, and he said to his congregation, just like this, he said, you know, I've been reading this Genesis book, and right there in the start, it says, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And if you're going to be part of this church anymore, you can't eat any flesh. And everybody then, their jaws like dropped, and they were all like, what am I going to do? It's just like when you skydive, you know, they take your picture as you're jumping out the door of the plane, and you're like, So they were like, what are we going to eat? And then he was like, you know what? Also, Jesus was a vegetarian, by the way, isn't his word. So 1 week later, the Reverend Hindmarsh, also an ironic name, started really getting into these vegetarians, saying you're all going to die, and he called it the Beefsteak Chapel. He was like, vegetarianism wasn't 1 week old, and they were already like, where are you going to get your protein? And so they took this kind of guff, you know, for like years and years, and then in 1817, his assistant minister, also kind of ironically named Metcalf, he takes 40 of them and he says, I'm going to go over to America. And so they got on a boat. They took 79 days. They were all vegetarian, like vegan people, sailing for 79 days with a crew that was all like, hey, you want some salted meat? Like, I got all this. And they were teasing them the whole way across. Like, I get pissed off when I'm flying to England and my vegan meal doesn't arrive, you know? It's like, it's 9 hours in a plane. I'm sitting in a chair in the sky, and these guys are 79 days at sea, no meat. Anyways, they ended up in Philadelphia, and they were a very important beachhead for vegetarianism in the United States. And they had it all, including these vegan hymns. And I found this vegan hymn with beautiful words, Little Lamb Who Ate Thee, and I called up my friend here, Daniel Redwood, and on Thursday, and I said, hey, I'm giving this talk, and would you maybe be able to put this to music? And he was like, sure. So I haven't heard this, but let me introduce Portland's vegan troubadour, Daniel Redwood.
You may have noticed that there is a photo down here. That is a friend of mine named Judy, a lamb at Lighthouse Sanctuary. And that's about the age that lambs get slaughtered, if they're not in sanctuaries. So, Little Lamb Who Ate Thee, it occurred to me late last night that that reminded me of something, and Google search or two showed me that William Blake, the great poet William Blake, in the 1770s wrote, one of his songs of innocence and experience, which was called Little Lamb Who Made Thee. So, this is Little Lamb Who Ate Thee. Lo, hear it struggle, hear it moan, as stretched beneath the knife, its eyes could melt a heart of stone. How meek it begs for its life. Hold, old daring man, from murder stay your hand, for God is life of all. You smite at God when flesh you slay, and take its precious life away. Can such a crime be small, when God is life of all?
Thank you, Daniel. And now if you will turn to page 352 in your hymnal, we will talk about the song Flesh Eaters. So these guys were singing, vegetarian hymns 200 years ago. Who knew? So the next thing is, so they never really took off as a religion, but they were very important, and they had some very important people that went there, including Sylvester Graham, who in 1830 was like the first vegan lecturer rock star. And he traveled all over the country preaching his vegetarian, or it wasn't even vegetarian called then, it was the no flesh diet. And his big principle, he had three things that he was big on: bland diets, no booze, and sex more than once a month is pathological. And I'm sure he had conversations like, why isn't this growing more? Like, I've got the bland food, no booze, and no sex. Like, who's with me? Anyways, he went, his diet was adopted by Oberlin College in Ohio, and they had this bland diet in there. And after about 2 or 3 months, this professor from Oberlin said, this is like, it's okay, but it's pretty bland. I'm going to bring in some pepper. So he brought in pepper and put in his food. He got busted for pepper, and they fired him. So, it wasn't really the tasty diet, like that we had now. We have all these great tasty foods out there. But he was very into bread. The butchers hated him, obviously, for that. But the bakers hated him because they were going into white bread, and he wanted this graham, solid, nutritional, yummy, whole wheat bread. So he was big into bread. He got hassled everywhere he went. People would stand up and give him shit at all these talks that he gave. And he had boarding houses all throughout the Northeast, Graham temperance houses, where people could come and they'd get vegetarian diets, and they'd talk about the issues of the day, which was abolitionism, suffragism, vegetarianism. They were all linked together in his realm, including, there was people in there like Sarah and Angelina Grimke who wouldn't eat sugar, they wouldn't drink tea, and they wouldn't drink coffee. You know why? Slave products. Those were products of the slave industry, so they weren't going to do coffee. Now it's like people just coffee. It's like, gotta have it. But these guys wouldn't eat it. So very righteous people. And yeah, he invented the graham cracker. The graham cracker guy was a vegan, right? Who knew? In the 1840s, so Graham had secularized vegetarianism. He took it out of the church and he secularized it, but he really hated doctors. He wasn't big on doctors, so he was a critic of them. And then this guy, Dr. William Alcott, took over, and he was a doctor, and he brought kind of medical science to the vegetarian diet. And he brought in fruit. That was another thing Graham hated, was fruit. So speaking of fruit, the first commune for vegetarians, or vegans actually, was Fruitland. They were so idealistic. They bought 90 acres outside of Harvard, Massachusetts, And they were going to do everything right. They were like, we're not going to bring any animals into this. We're going to plow it all by hand. We're going to drink cold water. We're going to bathe in cold water. And we're only going to wear linen clothes because we can't wear cotton because of slaves, and wool as animals. And upward growing vegetables only. No downward growing vegetables, like because you had to rip it out of and take the life of the plant. So very, idealistic. And they managed to get 13 people to their commune. This was Abigail May, who was a great woman suffragist, and she was married to Bronson, and they were the parents of Louisa May Alcott, who later wrote Little Women. So Louisa May Alcott was raised on this crazy Fruitland place. Their residence, it was like a reality show, All these guys were some central casting. They had a farmer who just got out of jail for not cutting his beard. They had a nudist who they tried to get him to wear like a sheet at least during the day. They had a Catholic priest and a guy with Tourette syndrome that was just going around cussing all day. So it was crazy. And there was all men except they had one other woman, but she got busted for eating fish with a neighbor, so they kicked her out. So it was just the three sisters of Louisa May and the mother. And, it was supposed to be this gender evolved commune and everything, but the guys were always going out and they were talking and they were giving these speeches and everything. And then, who did the work a lot was the women. And so it ended up disbanding after 7 months. But the Transcendentalists, Thoreau and Emerson, they were all, visitors, and they were trying to teach the kids that, you end flesh eating, you will end war. So it was an important place, but not very long lived. In the 1850s, the word vegetarianism was invented, and it was invented at a convention in New York City that they held, and it was a big debate. If you're a vegetarian, can you have milk? Can you have egg? And they had major debates, and they said, well, we want to have a bigger tent. So that's where that compromise that lives today came from, is those guys said, yeah, you can have milk and eggs and still be a vegetarian. But they had the Vegetarian Journal, which was like the Veg News of its day, and they gave free ads to women's suffrage groups and abolitionists because they were, once again, social reformers. And one of the great articles that I saw in there was this woman, Ann Denton, who argued, she goes, meat stunts social growth. It makes it impossible for the soul to expand or heart to enlarge if every avenue is clogged by flesh, while every truth must pass through the grains and the blood of mangled animals. Women, take charge of your life and become more than a fashion doll or cooking machine. So she was like awesome, and there's discussions now even going on in the animal rights movement. Do we want to bring in other social issues? But there's been this big connection with social movements, particularly women's suffrage, for long times. And they also wanted to go to Kansas and build this other commune, and some of them went out there and they were going to live in octagonal houses and idealistic, and they wanted Kansas to be a free state. So these vegetarians went out there to seed the vote out there. So it was a big deal, and but that's where vegetarianism came from. And they also had these big banquets where they had spices, and that was a big deal right then. It's like, wow, look at this. This food can actually taste good. So the bland diet was losing face there. Okay, I've got a Tofurky free coupon for the person that can tell me the first vegan product commercially. Like, there was no commercial products to this point, but this is the first, and it was a breakfast cereal. And I've got a free coupon for somebody that can tell me. Oh, there's two hands going up. What do you got? Close. Oh, did you say it? Yeah, you say granola, I say granula. Like, this guy, he ran this sanitarium in upstate New York, James Caleb Jackson, and he was, really into digestive health, and ham and eggs was the breakfast of the day, and he said we use some graham flour once again, and he created this cereal granola. And I mean, I'm not like a marketing genius, but he says here, the cereal you have to soak overnight. Do you really want to lead with that? I mean, it's like, not only does it taste bad, but it's inconvenient too. And it was kind of like a hearty grape nuts is what it's being described to. But that was granola. And he had a very famous visitor that was very interested, who also had a sanitarium, but this one was in Battle Creek, Michigan. And his name was John Harvey Kellogg, and he was married to Ella Kellogg. And he improved on granola, invented this product that he also called granola until he was sued by Jackson. And he's like, okay, how about granola? I'll switch out the U for the O. And lawyers weren't that evolved that day, so they were like, sure, whatever. And so he invented granola, and you didn't have to soak it overnight. And he and Ella was sort of probably the one that did most of the invention on this. It didn't get credit for it, but they were also, veg diet was big on them. They were all vegan, vegetarian. They were temperance. They were against booze. And they were also, like, they didn't even believe in sex once a month. They were like total celibacy, It's amazing any of us are here today, given how much these guys hated sex. But, we did somehow make it. But that was their big thing. And he found out, he drank soy milk every day. He found that acidophilus grew better on the soy milk than it did on cow milk. So when the famous Dion quintuplets were born in Toronto, one of the little babies had stomach issues, so he sent him a bunch of acidophilus from soy milk and healed him right up. So that was a big thing for him. He's also sort of marginally, is marketing thoroughly cooked and partially digested? Like, does that sound good to you guys? Partially digested? Are these like baby birds, or what is it? But he did say 1 pound more than equals 3 pounds of the best beef. So nice job there. But that was granola. And then in 1895, this guy, Secretary Dabney, who was the Secretary of Agriculture, he was worried, and he had been impressed with Kellogg's work, and he goes, can't you, I'm really worried about the supply of meat, like a protein, because right then the stockyards were a mess, and there was all these scandals that were happening with the safety of meat, and he saw the world population expanding. It's like, how are we going to feed all these people? So he goes to Kellogg, he says, can you invent a plant-based meats? Isn't that rare, like the U.S. government saying, please, could you invent a plant-based meat? Like, no one's ever come to Tofurky and said that. But he the first thing he invented was nuttos, which was a peanut flour-based cutlet that you could slice, dice, flavor any way, salmon, chicken, whatever. Came in a can because not a lot of people had refrigeration then, so it was canned food. And then he followed it up a little later on with Protos, which was wheat gluten, cereal, and peanut butter. A can of Protos cost 30 cents, which was a nickel cheaper than a can of meat. So he really made vegetarianism and vegan products a capital enterprise. He was mail ordering these. People could buy it through the mail. They could also go to the sanitarium. He was feeding people, and in the end of 1904, he was making 200,000 pounds of this a year at the Sanitas Nut Company. And that would be today, a slow week at Tofurky. So just to give you an idea of the scale of the operation there. Here was the first Tofurky that I ever saw mentioned, and this was served at the Chicago vegetarian dinner that they had there, and this was in 1895 after the World Vegetarian Congress. There was a World's Fair in Chicago in 1893, actually, and they had vegetarians came in from all over the world, and they all gave papers and talked about their vegetarian diet. And this made Chicago basically the Portland of the era. It was like they had vegetarian publishing houses and all these different things, and including their big thing after the conference was, wow, wouldn't it be great if there was like a all vegetarian restaurant? So that was their goal, and in 1895, the very first vegetarian restaurant in America opened in New York City, and it was aptly called Vegetarian Restaurant Number 1. Didn't last too long. I think they were still in the bland food thing. But Chicago, it took fire. And 2 years later, there was like 5 vegetarian restaurants in Chicago, including the famous Mortimer's, where you can see the menu where for 10 cents you could go get spaghetti. And they actually had 50 people working in there. So that was the biggest restaurant in Chicago at that time. And with those prices, you can see why you'd need 50 people. I mean, that's pretty good. 10 cents for asparagus toast. So Chicago, though, was, it was also a time when vegetarianism was adopted by the wealthy class, who saw it as like, this is a way to create industrious individuals and people, and we can make money at it. So it was like it had come from its sort of working class roots, and it now was becoming a social capital enterprise. So Chicago was really at the forefront of that movement right there. In the early 1900s, there also became the first sort of health food stores, including one in Chicago there, and then this one in Philadelphia that was developed by Mr. Lust, I guess was his name, he's the founder of the naturopathic movement that is still has 4,000 members today. So, just like about 100 years ago, there weren't really any natural food or health food stores now. So you think of that change of like how many we have right now going. I want to give a shout out to Portland, which actually in 1895 had 3 vegetarian restaurants right here in Portland. And they were Adventist-run ones, but also in 1911 was the year that Oda Tofu was founded. And this is the amazing Eileen Oda, who was just always so good to me. And early on, I would go there and I'd need a bag of beans. I'd buy a bag of soybeans, and she'd always give me free tofu because she knew I was not really rich. But she was an awesome person. Oda Tofu, first tofu shop in the United States. And then there was just this week an article in the New York Times. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was about Yami Kim, who was this Chinese woman who came over here, and she promoted tofu to women's clubs all across the U.S. as an alternative to meat that required a few resources to produce. She was way ahead of her time. The thing she said all the time about tofu to describe the taste, she says, tastes a little bit like brains and a little bit like sweetmeats. So again, marketing was still not their strong suit, but she was an amazing woman. She couldn't get citizenship here because of the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which she endured massive prejudice. She graduated at the top of her Women's Medical College of New York. She had a lab in the USDA, and Roosevelt wrote and said, I'd really like to give you citizenship, but I can't. But she was basically, the first time that tofu got marketed outside of Asian communities, and she's an unsung hero of the movement. So after, there's a bit of a span here, but who took it from there, vegetarianism was basically the Adventists who had Worthington Foods, Loma Linda, and they were the ones that kept it alive until the 1970s when the new granola came, which was tempeh. And, granola was a great big, aha experience for me, because in 1973 in Springfield, Ohio, where I was going to school, the only place you could buy granola was in the head shop where I was working. And it was like in this rainbow bag underneath the zigzag papers and the pipes. And people would come in and they'd go, give me some of those zigzags and a pipe, and I'll take a bag of granola too. I'm going to be hungry later on, So it was like a good kind of cross-marketing thing. But it was like, I go back 5 years later, and there's this 30 feet of granola, and there's a whole section of granola in the supermarket. And I'm like, damn, tempeh is going to be the same thing, you know. And I had read Diet for a Small Planet and the Farm Vegetarian Cookbook, which was from the Tennessee farm, who did a lot of groundbreaking work in that. And then in 1980, fueled by this new granola idea, tempeh, I went to the Hope Co-op in Forest Grove, and I rented out a kitchen at night for $25 a month, and I went under the Hawthorne Bridge and found this old beat-up refrigerator that I took back and cleaned out and became my first tempeh incubator. It was the same year that PETA was founded, and it was also the same year that Whole Foods was founded. So a lot of stuff happened in 1980. In 1982, this picture of all the woks over there, that's Rajneeshpuram. That was one of my clients. You know, these guys, I was in Hewsum by that time, which is a small little redneck town in the Cascade Mountains, and these Rajneeshis come in and they go, "Where's Seth Tibbott live?" And everybody's like, like this. Anyways, this is the biggest tempeh meal probably ever made. There were like 10,000 people at their Guru Festival in July that ate that, but it had nothing to do with what went on later on. Anyways, that's my tree house, and this is our tree house today. This is in Hood River. This is the Tofurky Company today and some of our products. And this is a LEED platinum cooled building that has, you know, all these solar panels on the roof and electric car charging and recycled everything. So great place over there. Now I just want to go over, you know, like what I'm seeing in the front lines, like where is commercial veganism today, just from our standpoint. And I'll tell you what, you know, from starting in 1980 to now, 39 years, I've seen uptown, you know, downtown, everything. Like, it's not just rocket ship all the way up. But I've never seen anything to what's going on right now. Like, this is what's going on in supermarkets. These are mainstream supermarkets. Mainstream supermarkets are used, yeah. So even, this is 5 years ago, you know, like the red line is sales in the supermarket. Supermarkets run, if they make 1 or 2% growth in a year, they're like thrilled. So if they see a category here that's like 4 or 5%, they're like, wow, we got to get more of that in. But in the last 2 years, they don't know what to do with this. It's like 40, 50% up. And it's just amazing. Like, everybody's just trying to make enough product to fill these requests. So it's really a hot and happening category. It's supercharged right now. But that's not the only thing that's going on. Plant-based milks. You know, this is the real hero and the real success story when you look at plant-based foods. As good as the growth is on meat alternatives, this growth is good, but it's 13% of all milk sold now in the U.S. is plant-based. By 2020, they're projecting that'll be 20%. Like, that's a huge number. You know, meat alternatives is still growing, but it's 1%, you know, of all meat, because there's just so much animal meat. But you can see this little fall from grace here, 25% off since 1990 of animal milk. And I'm just hoping that Taylor here had a vegan teacher, because he put milk over here with the paint and the arsenic of like food that you can't eat. So, I mean, he's right, but not every teacher would grade it that way. So plant-based milk's doing great. Plant-based yogurt's the same thing, doing crazy good, 55%. Miyoko's cheese, vegan cheese, you know. The first cheese that I ever saw was like 1992, you know, it was Veganrella. And some of these, you know, it like led to our big joke back then was, did you hear about the fire in the vegan cheese factory? Next day, the cheese still didn't melt. It was like perfect, you know. But that's all changed now. You know, you got Miyoko's, you got Daya, you got all these good melting cheeses. So, you know, I'm sure that the, you know, cow cheese wasn't so great 5,000 years ago when the first ones came out. But This is a very young, but it's grown so much in just 20 years. Like, could you give it 100 years before you really start knocking it? You know, people are like, vegan cheese is not so good. But it's actually really great, and I love Miyoko's. Vegan mayo. I had no idea mayo was the #1 condiment right now in the U.S. It's bigger than ketchup. And vegan mayo is also a jet stream going at 26%. One of the big things that's really helped, I think, is the Plant-Based Foods Association, which now has 115 companies. And it's great because we're able to talk to lobbyists as 115 people, companies, as opposed to one. Like when we were trying to get a couple of years ago in 2015, it was like the Department of Agriculture wanted to know, every 5 years they put out their recommendations of what you should eat, and we were like, tell everybody they should eat a little less meat. And they were all like, yeah, whatever, go away. But now with 115 companies, it's harder for them to dismiss us. So this is one of the real positive things that's happening. And it was founded by Miyoko's, Tofurky, Upton's, Follow Your Heart, and Dea, who are still the board members. And 3 out of the 5 board member companies have to be vegan. So that's the way we control it, because not all companies that are in there are 100% vegan. All right. Hey, Finland. I had a McDonald's burger. I hadn't had that in a while. But in Finland and in Sweden, all of the McDonald's have the McVegan burger on the menu in this cool packaging like that. And it's not like a trial like you'd expect, like you see all these guys doing these tests. They've done their tests. They have it on the menu. It's going crazy in Finland and even crazier in Sweden. So this was really cool. But then I went across the street to the grocery store right in the same building that the bus station is in, and I found 53 frozen meat alternatives in the freezer. And that was like oomph and pulled oats. There's a lot of oat stuff over there in Scandinavia, but it's really amazing to see that. There isn't a supermarket in America that I've ever seen 53 meat alternatives in. So it's really an amazing thing to see grow. Everybody, who knows Oatly? Has anybody seen Oatly? Oatly is, this brand of oat milk coming from Sweden, and it's so incredible, and I just love their marketing. They actually got sued for this little one here, which helped jumpstart their sales. It's like milk, but for humans. And then this was, I'm getting on a plane like out of Helsinki, and I open up the plane magazine and I see this nice little ad from Oatly, and it says, the title is "This Tastes Like Shit," blah, blah. And I go, I got to read on. And this is what it says. It says, "That's a real comment from a real person who tried one of our oat drinks for the first time. They think it tastes like oats because it does taste like oats. Here's the good part. If you don't like the taste of our oat drinks, you don't have to drink them. Taste is personal, which is why we don't take it personal if you don't like how they taste. There's a growing number of people who find oat drinks delicious, who can like the taste of the balance of protein, fiber, and unsaturated fats and carbs, and know that it makes them feel good. So give it a go, and if you don't like it, give it to someone you don't like." That's what business students call a win-win. So, just having that kind of humor, I think, really brings everybody into the conversation and makes us look less pious. But Oatly's great. Then, we've been doing a lot of business over there in England. Some of my favorite things, England is just explosive now in growth. They were the ones that invented vegan terminology and have such a long history. One of the big things they have is this Veganuary program where everybody pledges to be vegan for the month of January. And now we're trying to get it started over here in the U.S., so you'll be seeing more Veganuary buzz come January. But some of my favorite stores, London, as you'll see, is one of the top cities in the country for vegan foods. My favorite places. This is the Temple of Hackney, which is, they have this wonderful seitan chicken over here, like Kentucky Fried Chicken, which they used to be called the Temple of Satan, by the way, which got us a little edgy. But you can see they're right next to the Hackney Meat Center, and the Meat Center has like no one in it, and there's big queues out the front door of the Hackney every day, and it's amazing. And KFC has now announced that they're going to bring a vegan option to their things in London. So that's pretty awesome. But it's all because of these guys, and they're just young, great kids. Also, there's this What the Pitta that is a doner. It's called Vegan Doner, which is like a Turkish burrito kind of thing. And they were nominated for Best Kebab in London. Not Best Vegan Kebab, but Best Kebab. Amazing stuff. Tofurky's got sandwiches there, which we've been selling in the natural food market. But this Veganuary, all 4 of these are going in 500 Sainsbury stores, so you can go, grab and go. It's just convenient. They're just so set up for sandwiches over there. That's been a big, fun thing. Australia is where I'm headed tomorrow, and it's like the 54th largest country population-wise in the world. There's 26 million people. But they're the number 4 vegan market in the world for products, and it's amazing what they have. Domino's, every Domino's has a vegan cheese pizza that you can order. The groundbreakers was this Gigi's group. This is a Gigi's Pizza, and this is Gigi's Pizza. It was this Italian restaurant that was serving meat and dairy. They saw like Cowspiracy, and they said, we can't have anything to do with this anymore. So they took all meat and dairy out of their restaurant, and they went vegan. They got so much shit for it from their regular customers, but now it's just like this. There's like a queue at the door every 5 o'clock. If you're not there by 5:30, you're not going to sit. I mean, it's that popular, and it's so crazy. So, and right down the street, same thing happened at Gelato Blue. It was a gelato place, and they figured out that we can't do dairy anymore. You know, I really respect that. I mean, because they had an ongoing business, and they took the chance, and they went vegan. But it's been huge, the best move any of them took. So that's Australia. Israel and Germany, also big hotspots. This was last fall. The biggest animal rights march in the world was held in Tel Aviv, which is amazing. And, you know, that's exploding over there, as it is in Germany. This is a vegan croissant. There's like a vegan hotel there in Germany, right in Berlin, right next to Vegans, which is a vegan grocery store. And they have like a vegetarian section where you can get the buffet. It's about this long. And then they have the vegan section, which is like 30 feet long of options. But those are the best croissants in all the world. This is like a chart that I keep track of just to see what's happening worldwide, and I just updated this. This is vegan restaurants per capita in 2018, and you can see the number 1 per capita is Prague, and followed by Portland, which has 50 vegan restaurants. These are all vegan restaurants, by the way, not like vegetarian vegan, within 15 miles of the city center, and this was, I got this from Happy Cow. And it's interesting to see that Chicago down here has fallen off. They used to be the center. They were the Portland, and now they're only 26 restaurants. So much bigger city, but look what Portland's done like that. So those are some of the cool places to plan your next trip abroad, and you'll know you'll be fed. Not that I've had trouble getting fed anywhere now. So with all this good news, there's also pushback. You know, the empire's going to strike back somewhere. And this just came up, and there was a law that just passed and became law in Missouri. August 28th, they said, you can't call, you know, it has, if you're saying the word meat, it has to be from a harvested animal, like not a slaughtered animal, but a harvested animal. Like, we can't use their word, but they can use our word. That's our word, harvest. Anyways, on the 29th, we sued the state of Missouri, along with the ACLU. And yeah, the crazy part of this law is it's very poorly written, it's very abstract, and any one of the 114 counties, attorney generals can decide that you're not in compliance and can take you to court. So, and the crazy thing is, like, the penalty is a $1,000 fine and a year in jail. Like, I could end up in jail for Tofurky, right? I mean, it's just, and it's actually, the lawyers say that's actually a good thing because it shows how wacky the law is. So the Animal Legal Defense Fund, yay, those great people that are in Lewis and Clark College, and the ACLU and Good Food Institute and Tofurky were all suing the state. So it was actually, I was in Chicago last week. It was kind of creepy being that close to Missouri. I was like, whoa, this is a 2-hour drive. Also, even worse is the French labeling law. This is the whole country of France passed this law. You can't say vegan sausage. You can't say vegan mozzarella cheese style. You can't say anything, and those guys are enforcing it. We have these small little online shops that sell Tofurky in France, and they're like calling us up and going, hey, we got a call, we can't sell this and we can't sell that. I mean, this is like so crazy. And Canaries, by the way, is bullshit. I call Canaries. And this is but there's big marches, like the animal rights community is coming alive in France. There's actually a title to an article that says, "Butchers demand protection from vegans." I'm like, you're the guys with the knives, like what? But this says the slaughterhouse of Le Mangers is the real butcher. And so France, though, is really, and nobody pushed back on that because there really aren't a lot of big plant-based food producers in France. And so it just passed, and now they're enforcing it. And it's a bad situation. Of course, the famous Almond Doesnt lactate. This is the FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, and with almond milk and plant-based milks becoming such a big part of milks, like this one is really also up for redefinition by the FDA. And, Colbert got somebody to put it in their wedding vows, and they got a free trip to New York or something. And an Almond Doesnt lactate. So the bottom line, I see all of these as kind of like a good thing because, when you think about it, it's like Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. We've been ignored a lot of time out there, since 1980, and laugh at you. I make Tofurky, of course they're going to laugh. It's meant to make you laugh. But then they fight you. So lawyers become really important. Like that's why this animal law conference was so great in Chicago last week. And we'd love to see that because there's going to be a lot of fighting now because we're in that fight stage. So, which brings me to our vegan future. And I have been to the future and come back with some headlines. And I've got these glasses. Everybody's got these in the future. They're all over. Okay, so here's the headlines that we're going to all see based on all of this. All right, so August 21, 2035, beans, not beef, credited as a major factor in meeting climate goals. Once thought of as possible to obtain, the World Climate Congress reported today that the planet was well ahead of its climate change goal of less than 1.5 degrees centigrade warming by 2050. Though some progress has been made by world governments reducing carbon emissions by improvements in the energy sector, the success of the Beans Not Beef dietary program was singled out as the main factor. In a speech at the opening session of Congress today, U.S. activist Jack Sherritt was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on the project. We have reduced beef consumption in the U.S. by 88%, but there is still more work to be done globally, quoted Jack, who at 29 will be the youngest recipient of this prize. Good job, Jack Sherritt, son of Shauna Sherritt. So good job, Shauna. I was just reading, there was an article about how beef is the real biggest problem food in terms of global warming. And, if everybody just continued even to eat the current levels of chicken and pork and cheese, but if they took beef down 90% and switched it out to beans, we would hit that climate change goal. So good job there. Here's one. In 2049, I found that U.S. government ends all subsidies for animal-based proteins. You know, I mean, that's one of the big things right now, is it's not a level playing field for us because meat and dairy get all of the love from the government and the poor little plant-based food producers get nothing. But this all changed. Congress today repealed all subsidies on agriculture related to the slaughter of animals to be used for human consumption. Pressure has been mounting for years from the powerful plant-based foods lobby headed by Melissa Patterson. With 65% of our citizens now eating 100% plant-based diets, it is long overdue to remove these subsidies to enrich a failing industry, said Melissa. Head lobbyist Maddie Slater was able to secure low-interest loans in the bill to be used for plant-based food startups, as well as increased subsidies on nuts, which will greatly aid the $78 billion nut, milk, and cheese industries. So, good things there coming on that. You know, these governments, they're really beholden to where the money is. They're just following money. So once we hit, 65% plant-based foods, it's all going to switch. Like, we're going to be the ones welding the big club over there, and our senators and congressmen will be way more receptive when we come in. We might get some free rides on jets. I don't know. Okay, Mars. We've landed on Mars by, 2053, with a population now of 1,420 former Earthlings. Mars has a lot of mouths to feed. With limited resources and space, the intense cultivation of fruits and vegetables in greenhouses is now serving as an example to Earthbound residents of the efficiencies and health benefits of a vegan diet. We are all quite happy with the abundance and quality of food here, quoted Mars Secretary of Agriculture Ruby Boyer. Obviously, running precious grains through animals would be both cruel and inefficient. We hope our work will serve as an example throughout the galaxy. They're not going to take pigs and cows on the 9-month trip to Mars. And even if they did, how would they feed them? It's going to be in these little greenhouses. They can't afford it. Meat is only grown now because it's an illusion that it's endless resources that we have, and we don't have that, and they certainly don't have that on Mars. Okay, extinction labels. Congress overwhelmingly passed a law today that makes it mandatory that any company selling packaged food in the U.S. market include an extinction facts label, detailing the impact of this food on the planet, including habitat loss, water use, and greenhouse gas release. This will greatly aid consumers in making eco-friendly choices at the grocery store and pay off in a huge way as we continue to fight the effects of global warming, said Brennan McConnell Greiner, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. A more controversial law requiring cancer warnings on all animal-based meats was passed last year on the heels of the now famous meat tax bill of 2055, championed by Senator Reed Sherrick, Democrat from Arizona. Good job there, that's going to change. That's a game changer right there. People got to look at what they're eating. Okay, so what are all these people going to do once there's no more rangeland out there in the countries? As factory farms and meat processing plants have disappeared, the need to retrain workers in these industries has been a growing concern. While most were able to find jobs in the rapidly expanding plant-based and cellular meat processing industries, Congress has passed a massive job retraining bill for those wanting to acquire other skills. Some of the retraining courses will be in the exploding solar industry, urban farming, wave energy producers, which all are seeing major growth. Solar cell jobs, for instance, have been doubling in a number of years, every 2 years for the past decade. Senator Kayleigh Hessler, Democrat, Oregon, co-sponsored the bill with Senator Macy Jenks, Green Party of Vermont. You can see, like 65% of today's students will move into careers that haven't even been created yet. So let's not worry too much about what are all these people going to do if they lose their, meat jobs. All right. National parks and solar farms expand to former rangelands, January 12th, 2089. All right. With the end of animal agriculture, the question of how to utilize previously used grazing lands has been a constant question for those living in rural America that previously depended on ranching as a vital source of income. Now, 10 years after closing of the last slaughterhouse in Oregon, many communities such as Burns, Oregon, are seeing an uptick in the local economy as tourists flock into the new expanded Malheur National Wildlife Refuge and Park. We are thrilled that Burns is now such a great example of how local rural economies can flourish by creatively adjusting to the times, said Jane Frost, governor of Oregon. You know, I just want to point out that, like, this is, you know, Malheur was where the Bundy group of ranchers went out and they were like, we need more land. We don't need any, you know, land for birds. We need it for beef. Well, I want to point out that no vegan company has ever taken over a wildlife refuge demanding more land, you know, because we have enough. And isn't that great? All right. Fast food. Burger King, the last national U.S. fast food chain to sell animal-based meat, followed the lead of McDonald's, Taco Bell, and Kentucky Fried Chicken and rolled out its all-vegan menu today. All four chains have been hit by massive closings as the Behemoth Veggie Grill has continued to chip away at their core consumers. Veggie Grill now has 38,849 restaurants worldwide, according to Rachel Slenick, company CEO. So good job, Veggie Grill. All right, here's a chart. You remember that chart of the vegan restaurants? Like we look at Happy Cow, we go to some place and we log in and we drive all over town trying to find restaurants, right? Well, in the future, there's this new, because of the sharp decline in meat-based restaurants, there's this Where's the Beef app. There you go on the Where's the Beef app and it shows you where all these meat restaurants are. It's kind of cool if you're a meat eater. Once the king of protein, it has become harder and harder to find restaurants serving animal-based meats. Since the withdrawal of subsidies in 2106 and the meat tax of 2108, our sales have plummeted, reported Dawn King, granddaughter of former U.S. Representative Steve King and current CEO of Ruth Chris Steakhouse. People always compare our prices and quality to the Impossible Steakhouse right next door, and we just can't compete. Faith Ford, president of the powerful Ravid Corp, compiled the list based on data from the Where's the Meat app. So, and you can see, like, this is actually a projection for Lagos, Nigeria. This is going to be the biggest, in 100 years, the biggest city in the world will be Lagos, Nigeria, 88 million, and they only have 12 restaurants serving meat. And Portland, look at that. We've cleansed our city by 2115. 6 months later, famous Where's the Beef app declares for bankruptcy. The once popular phone app, Where's the Meat, filed for protection in Chapter 11 bankruptcy today due to a lack of restaurants selling animal-based meats. The app had been quite popular with a small but passionate number of carnivores who, at last count, were estimated by the AC Nielsen Company to number about 1% of the U.S. population. It's been super helpful finding a restaurant that still sells animal-based meat, especially when traveling, said Andrew Trump, great-grandson of ex-President Donald Trump, who was impeached in February 2019. You guys. I never minded driving across town to find something to eat in New York City, said Andrew. All right, so that's where we're headed. All right, here we go. It's official. There are no more active slaughterhouses left in the U.S., according to the USDA's National Agriculture Statistics Service, which published its annual slaughter summary today. As plant-based foods and cellular meat alternatives have surged, the slaughter industry has been in rapid decline since 2020. U.S. President Katrina Owens was on hand today in Springdale, Arkansas, as what was the largest slaughterhouse in the world formally closed. I want to thank Bella Olivia Steinberg of the Animal Legal Defense Fund for her tireless work, bringing this great day for all animals into fruition. I am also glad that the Smithsonian has agreed to exhibit the building on the Mall in Washington, D.C., so that we may never forget those animals who perished. Katrina was then teleported back to the White House, where she planned to host a massive state dinner for a legion of activists. So, those are some far out, I got it. You know, it sounds like far out headlines, but you look at like where we've been and where we're going to be in 200 years, and it's so crazy. I've seen this in my life. You know, it's like starting out in 1980, there was not a lot, you couldn't get anything in any of the grocery stores in Portland. You know, it was very hard to find just food to eat as a vegan. And now look at it. So it was just like, and Tofurky came along, at a moment, it was just like this special moment for me where I could see, finally, I could see my way through. It was like the Greeks have two words for time. One is chronos, which is chronological time, and the second is kairos, which is this magic moment when time stands still and you can see your way through. And I submit to you today that that's where this world is at right now. We are at this kairos moment where we can finally see our way through. And we can do this. This is more gettable. Like people would ask me when I get interviewed early on in the Tofurky game, they would go, do you ever think like this will become the normal? Is like people will eat this instead of turkey? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. But I was kind of like, bullshitting a little bit because I didn't really believe it. But now it just seems inevitable that this is the way it's going to go. And I'm just like 100% sure that we're headed in this direction. And I just want to leave you with this quote from the Sun, which a friend sent me. And, it's sort of speak to me when I'm down. I always get strength from this. And it says, resist the temptation to drown in fatal. Resist thinking that this is all there is. Realize that for every ongoing war and religious outrage and environmental devastation and political lie, there are 1,000 counterbalancing acts of staggering kindness and generosity happening all over the world, right now on a breathtaking scale from flower box to cathedral. Resist the temptation to drown in fatalism, to shake your head and sigh and just throw in the karmic towel. Realize that this is the perfect moment to change the energy of the world, to step right up and crank your personal volume, right when it all seems dark and bitter and offensive and acrimonious and conflicted and bilious. There's your opening. Remember magic, and finally believe that you are part of a groundswell, a resistance, a seemingly small but actually very, very large impending karmic overhaul, a great shift, the beginning of something important and potent and unstoppable. Thank you.